Welcome back. So, in our series on GLP-1 programs, we've really dug into the why, that critical, shaky window in the first few weeks. But today, we get to the most important part, the how. We're going to move from theory to reality and see what this looks like on the ground, in practice. Let's get right into it. Right. We know those first 8 weeks can be a real make-or-break period. So the question isn't if we need to support patients. Of course we do. The real question is, how do we do it without completely overwhelming our clinical staff? This is where we see exactly how a stabilization layer can be integrated directly into an active, busy workflow. And really, that's the big question we're tackling today. This isn't about some shiny new app or, a nice-to-have feature. We are asking a fundamental, structural question. How does all this stabilization work actually become core infrastructure? How does it become the very foundation that makes your entire program stronger and more resilient? To answer that, we're going to walk through a 5-part blueprint. First up, we'll look at the architecture, where this layer actually fits in. Then we'll see it from 2 different angles, the patient's and the staff's. After that, we'll unpack the intelligence it creates, and finally, we'll tie it all back to the end game, a stable, predictable, and successful program. Okay, so let's start with the 30,000-foot view. Where does this system even live? It's really important to understand that this is not another module you have to cram into your EMR. No, it operates in parallel. Think of it as a dedicated behavioral layer that runs alongside and supports the main clinical workflow. Now, here's where it gets really interesting when you see the contrast. In a standard workflow, what happens? Every single patient question, every bit of uncertainty they feel, it all hits your clinical staff directly. It just creates this chaotic, unpredictable fire hose of support requests. But a stabilized workflow, it slots in a behavioral layer that is built specifically to absorb and filter all of those predictable, high-volume, low-stakes needs before they ever burn out your clinical team. And look, for any of this to work, trust is absolutely everything. That is why this behavioral layer has very clear, very hard boundaries. It doesn't prescribe, it doesn't change a dose, it definitely doesn't diagnose. It is there to support the plan that the clinician has already set. So the key here is that clinical authority is always preserved. This thing is a shield for your clinical team, not a replacement. So we've seen how this protects the clinical team. Now let's flip the coin and see it from the patient's point of view. For them, those first 8 weeks can feel, pretty uncertain as their body adjusts. This layer is designed to take that uncertainty and turn it into a guided, structured, and honestly, a much more confident journey. And that journey is mapped out very deliberately. It actually starts before the first dose, by setting clear expectations right from the get-go. Then, in those first couple of weeks, proactive check-ins help normalize what they're feeling. During that peak adaptation window, the system is right there with them, putting symptoms into context. By the time they're getting ready to titrate up, they feel supported and sure of themselves, not lost and confused. And this quote just says it all, doesn't it? This is the feeling we're shooting for. The system gets ahead of the common worries, the mild nausea, the changes in appetite, and addresses them proactively. It takes what could be a really anxious, lonely experience and transforms it into one where the patient feels like, okay, someone's got my back, I'm on the right track. So if the system is handling all this patient uncertainty, what does that actually mean for your staff? Well, it's a total game changer. It creates a much more disciplined way to escalate information, a system that's built from the ground up to cut through the noise and protect your team's most precious resource, their time and their focus. At the heart of all this is a concept we call signal filtering. The system is essentially trained to tell the difference between noise, all the expected, manageable stuff like a little bit of nausea that goes away, and signal, which are the actual clinically relevant symptoms that really do need a provider to step in. Just picture a funnel. At the top, you've got all this broad input. A patient reports a common symptom. The system immediately filters it, offers some reassurance. But if that symptom crosses a clinical line that's been preset, maybe it's too severe or lasts too long, only then does it pass through the gate. And what comes out the other end is a crystal clear, focused alert for your clinical team. So the bottom line here is this. Your team is no longer drowning in a sea of repetitive, low-level questions. Their inbox is cleaner, the alerts they get are actually meaningful, which lets them focus their expertise where it truly matters. Now, this operational efficiency is really only half the picture. A stabilization system isn't just a workflow tool. It's also a powerful intelligence-gathering engine. Every single check-in, every response,
It all becomes data. Data you can use to turn patient engagement into a real strategic asset.
So the system is constantly watching engagement during that critical 8-week window. It's on the lookout for early warning signs of instability, like a missed check-in, or maybe some hesitation around a dose increase. It then automatically flags these patients and groups them into risk cohorts. And this gives you this incredible high-level view of who might be struggling and where you can make your program even better.
And here's just a simple, concrete example of what that looks like. In those first 4 weeks, if a patient is missing check-ins, they might get flagged as high risk for dropping out within 30 days. Later on, say weeks 5 to 8, if they start ghosting you around a scheduled titration, they might get flagged as a moderate risk for 60-day churn. You see, this isn't just raw data. It's intelligence you can act on, allowing you to intervene at exactly the right moment.
Okay, so let's tie this all together. We've talked about the patient experience, the staff workflow, and the data it generates. So what's the ultimate outcome of all this? Well, there is a direct, straight line from creating stability for your patients early on to building long-term financial resilience for your entire program. And this chart really tells the whole story. That bar on the left, that's what an unstructured early phase looks like. Churn is just all over the map, completely unpredictable. But look to the right. When you bring in that structured experience, you see how dramatically you can smooth out that volatility. You create a much more predictable and manageable flow of patients through your program. Now let's put some real dollars and cents to this. Let's say, based on industry data, that for a program with a 6-month median persistence, your typical patient lifetime value, your LTV, is just under $1,800. Okay, but watch what happens. If you can extend that median persistence by just one single month, and that is totally achievable by reducing that early churn, that LTV jumps to almost $2,100. That's a nearly 17% increase. That is the financial power of stabilizing the early phase. And this really gets to the core economic principle here. Stopping a patient from dropping out in their first month has a massively outsized impact on their lifetime value compared to, say, saving them in month 10. And why is that? It's because that early window carries the highest economic density. It is by far the most leveraged place you can possibly focus your attention efforts. So, to wrap this all up, what we're really talking about is a new kind of discipline. Early phase stabilization isn't just a feature, it's operational infrastructure. It's built to protect and preserve clinical authority, first and foremost. Operationally, it cuts down on strain and chaos, and economically, it builds the foundation for a much more resilient and predictable business. So, that leaves us with one final, crucial question for you to think about. When you look at your own program today, is that early phase a source of unpredictable churn, of operational risk, or have you turned it into a structured, predictable asset that drives the long-term health of not just your patients, but your business as well?